This is the key to everything. The bell tolled for me for Western civilization on the 1st of July 2007. Some people will point to financiers. After all, they sold competence and instead delivered the great financial disaster of 2008. The last was followed by a never-ending tidal wave of governmental incontinence, destroying trust and value in the process. Others will finger politicians across the decades for mistaking personal for national interest. Yet more will blame the rise of tech giants, social media platforms, and the instant gratification it suggests as the source of all our woes. And all these might well be true, in part. However, they only skim the surface of our accelerating fall. No, the final nail in the coffin of our ancient and civilized order was the introduction of the smoking ban. In one fell swoop, man was deprived of the setting for intellectual speculation. No longer could friends gather by the fireplace, sitting on a set of Chesterfield sofas to smoke cigars accompanied by some port wine and brandy to speculate about mostly random things. Places of discussions fueled by spirits floating on heavy cigar smoke simply vanished. No alternatives were ever provided. Bureaucrats and lawmakers seldom think about these things. Pubs ruled themselves out almost overnight. Whilst they stopped smelling of smoke, in the process they started stinking of everything else, of latrines, disinfectant, and most of the time, much, much worse. It is impossible to exaggerate how far down the road our civilization decline has travelled since that fateful decision was made. Yesterday's intellectual speculation is today's conspiracy theory. Skepticism used to be the welcome sign of an enquiring intelligence. It's now a crime. In the field of vaccination and related to COVID, for instance, we even see dictionaries jump on the branding bandwagon. Merriam-Webster, America's oldest dictionary publisher, defines as anti-vaxxer a person who is opposed to vaccine mandates, among others. One can no longer be pro-vaccine, but against forcing people to be vaccinated against their conscience. The same is true of the climate. It no longer does to be attentive to one's environment, but look askance at the official devotion to the Mother Earth cult currently guiding the bulk of our decision makers, in particular in the field of energy. To be open about people's private lives no longer suffices. The individual must comply and submit openly, regardless of whether he believes what he says. Cowed, he loses his dignity, and with it, his sense of fun. Along the avant-garde of progress, the comedian drove roughshod over every taboo. Now he bows to pressure and apologizes for the fun he brought to us. How depressing was it to see David Walliams apologizing for Little Britain, the show that made him truly famous. To dare to tread in the fertile field of inquiry now risks online cancellation, reputational destruction, and physical job losses. Looking back to pre-smoking ban times, the idea of cancellation was unknown. A youngster nowadays would need the fancy of a Jules Verne to imagine a place by the fire where topics of any kind about anything could be broached and feed an incredible lust for debate, discussion, and friendship, which usually started after dinner and finished at around 4 a.m. the next morning. In that time, cigar in one hand, glass of brandy in the other, sitting like the world was a mystery waiting to be undressed layer by layer. Problems were discussed, a handful resolved, and the way home, as if by magic, always found, more or less. And while the solutions of the night before seemed crystal clear at the time, many of them lost the contours in the cold light of day. But what remained was a sense that whatever the problems, solutions inevitably carried with them the seeds of further complications. This inevitably led to a certain type of humility. Interestingly, it fed a desire to delve more deeply into topics which, each in themselves, made one wonder at the vastness of the universe and our place in it, engendering a love for knowledge and for life, which made everything worthwhile. A good evening was only guaranteed, interestingly, if the group was intellectually and professionally diverse. The acceptance of alternative views was a sine qua non of a memorable evening. Few of us would have sat there whiling away the small hours of the morning to listen to charmless political talking points. A Greta Thunberg would have been greeted politely, of course, how else? But her historical knowledge would have been prodded, and it would have revealed in a short space of time that her stance had more to do with feelings than knowledge. And that too would have been acceptable because her feelings would have been taken at face value. However, her absolute certainty, which is currently the preferred weapon of her allies, would have been mollified and humanized. Humor, in this case, would have acted like a massage oil on stiff shoulders. The cigar would have slowed the cadence of her sentences, and the whiskey shaved some of the stridency in her voice. She might even have found space to flirt, laugh, and forget the world for a while and focus on herself and her company a little. But alas, cigar smoking was banned. A void was created, and civility fell into it.